I'm Jennifer Brackney. I'm manager with the Workforce Development Office, and basically what we do is we assist individuals with their career plans, and we also work with businesses who are looking to hire individuals. One of the things that we're focusing on right now with the environment in Peoria, Central Illinois, is how to assist individuals through a layoff. And there's a couple of things that we look at as we're dealing with someone who's going through a layoff. The first thing that we look at is that individuals really have to deal with the fact that they've been laid off. And one of the first things that we find with individuals is that they feel like it's their fault. It's something that they've done wrong. And it's really beginning to help an individual understand that it really isn't their fault that they've been laid off. A layoff is just really part of a process. And to understand that there's really a difference between being fired and being laid off. Typically being fired means that it's generally focused on a person. Being laid off is focused on a position. So it's really not something that you could have avoided by doing anything different at your job. It was just part of what the employer was looking to do at that point in time to help the bottom line. And since 2005, it's estimated that there's been about 1,300 different layoff events affecting about 130,000 people every month. So the fact that you've been laid off means that you're not alone in that process. One of the other difficult things that happen when you're laid off is that you really get outside of your comfort zone. And your comfort zone is the idea that you know what to expect from your work, from your coworkers, and the demands of your job. And once you're laid off, you get outside of that comfort zone, and it really adds really a mild state of shock to what's going on in your life. So really understanding that it is a shocking situation, you weren't expecting it, and that you're outside of your comfort zone, and then what do you need to do in order to deal with that? As you're going through a layoff, you have to take time to heal. And as we've mentioned, you're outside of your comfort zone, you're in a mild state of shock, and it's not unusual for a person to go through basically a grieving process. The first being the shock of finding out that you're being laid off. The second step would typically be that you're angry. You're not happy with the situation, and you're not happy that you're not in control of that situation. And then really the next step is to go through mourning. You're really depressed and kind of going through all of those kind of anxieties that go along with being laid off. And then hopefully as you're going through that process, the next step is acceptance. And once we get to the point of acceptance as you're going through the process of a layoff, you look at what do I do from here? What is my plan, and how do I put that together? Part of the layoff process, once you've gone through the healing process and the accepting process of the layoff, is to really look at a plan. And what is your next step? What are you going to do? And how are you going to find that next career opportunity? Part of developing a plan is really literally taking out a notebook, writing down what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, and then marking off things as you accomplish them, so at the end of the week you can see that you've really done something to move yourself forward and move yourself to the next step. And part of a career plan is that you're also looking at, where do I go from here? Do I look at a different line of work than what I've done in the past? Do I have something in the back of my mind that I've always wanted to do, and this is a good opportunity to look at that? Do I look at new training opportunities that might be available? Do I finish a degree? So really putting all of those things out on the table and identifying which direction you would like to go, and then developing a plan. Another key step in the unemployment process and in part of being laid off is really to look at your financial situation. The tough part is looking at your spending and what can you do to make sure that you can hold your household together as you go through this transition to your next job. And probably one of the first steps that people really need to look at is how they might be able to be more frugal with their spending and their day-to-day activities. Don't use your credit cards. Kind of cut those up or put those aside so that you're not adding a lot of debt to those credit cards that's just going to cause more stress in the future. You might also look at how much you're spending at restaurants. Typically 14% of our budget goes to food, and about half of that we spend at restaurants. So maybe look at some ways that you might be able to cut back on going out to eat on a regular basis. Kind of stay away from the malls for a little while until you get everything in place with your budget, and just kind of tighten your belt a little bit and put a plan together to ensure that as a household that all of your financial needs are met. One of the things that you would do after you've been laid off is to make sure that you apply for unemployment benefits. These are very important, and they help individuals go through that transition until they find their next job. There's a couple of ways that you can apply for unemployment benefits. You can actually go to the employment office, or you can apply online. I think right now the benefit to applying online is that it's a very simple process. The instructions are very easy to follow. It takes about a half hour to do that, and you really avoid those long lines that are at the employment office typically because so many people are gathering down there to apply for unemployment. Put together a resume, network with others, and practice for your interviewing. And one of the first things that we tell individuals that are going through a layoff is don't be afraid to tell people that you're unemployed and that you're looking for work. Because the more that you network, the more that you let people know that you are looking for opportunities, the more of a chance that you will have to actually obtain employment in the future. And also as part of that, you really need to make sure you have a very good resume. Typically resumes that go to an employer, they get hundreds of resumes a day. So you need to make sure that your resume stands out from the others. And typically there's a 10-second rule that we apply to resumes. So a manager who is looking at a resume looks at that resume for about 10 seconds. So you need to make sure whatever you're putting in there really stands out and grabs that person's attention so that they set it to the next side and that you get an interview with that employer. Part of a resume is really just making sure that it's perfect. There are no spelling errors, there are no grammar errors, that it has a typical margin. We typically look at just a white piece of paper with the traditional items listed on there, an objective, a heading, your education, your work experience, some of your accomplishments. All those things need to be nicely tied together and put in a resume that you can send out to employers so that they know what you do and how that fits into the jobs that they have available with their company. Typically, people who are going through this process right now, they may or may not have interviewed for quite some time. So make sure that you take the time to think through the questions that an employer might ask you during that interview. Typically, one of the first questions that an employer will ask is, tell me about yourself. So make sure that you have a little bit of a prepared statement that outlines who you are, what you're doing, and why you're applying for this particular job. Also, there are typical questions that you can find in any interview book, about 20 different questions that an employer will ask. And be sure to look through those, write down some of the responses that would make sense to you, practice those, and really be prepared to sell yourself to that employer during the interview and make sure that you're marketing yourself to the best of your ability. As you are looking for new employment opportunities, be sure to take advantage of different events that are available in your community. Typically there are career fairs, or there's the online information that's available to people that outline jobs that are available. So if there are different services or different events in the area that you know of, be sure to bring your resume and dress appropriately and be prepared to talk to those employers about your skill and your willingness to work with them and their company. Typically what employers are looking for is, can you do the job? Are you willing to do the job? And are you cooperative? So as you're talking to an employer, make sure that you highlight all of those things, your skills, your background, your education, your willingness to work, and your willingness to be cooperative and be part of a team within that employer's office or company. The other thing to do is to really focus on yourself a little bit. Make sure that as you're going through this process that you're staying healthy, you're exercising, you're eating right. Avoid negative people. A lot of times you'll get with a group of people and maybe the group from your particular company's been laid off, and it's good to go through that process initially, just venting and explaining some of the things that are affecting you in a negative way. But be sure that eventually you're moving away from that and you're staying positive and you're staying healthy and you're taking care of yourself and you're moving forward. I'm Jennifer Brackney with Workforce Network.